with their relentless hunger for domination. They were not just invaders, they were a force of nature, an unyielding tide that drowned everything in its path. Entire planets burned under their assault. Billions of lives vanished, some turned to ash by their weapons, others enslaved to serve as fuel for their endless war machine. Humanity's once proud colonies crumbled one by one, leaving only whispers of resistance scattered across the void. On Eos Prime, a small moon orbiting a dying star, what remained of humanity clung to survival. It wasn't much a few cities carved into the rocky surface, overcrowded shelters filled with frightened refugees, and makeshift defenses cobbled together from scraps of old ships and outdated tech. But it was enough. For now, Eos Prime was remote, hidden away in a corner of space. The Krylos hadn't fully explored yet. That made it a haven, however fragile, those who had nowhere else to go. Among the survivors was Daniel Hayes, a man who had once been an engineer designing engines for interstellar freighters. Now he led a ragtag group of fighters trying to hold back the Krylos scouts that occasionally probed the moon's defenses. He wasn't a soldier by training, but necessity had forced him into the role. His sister Emma worked at the medical bay, stitching up wounds and doing her best to keep people alive despite the shortages of medicine and supplies. Together, they were doing what they could to keep hope alive. But hope was a hard thing to find these days. Every day brought new challenges. Food was running low, and the hydroponic farms struggled to keep up with demand. Water rationing meant long lines outside distribution centers, where tempers flared and arguments broke out over who deserved more. Power outages were common, plunging portions of the underground shelters into darkness and forcing people to huddle together for warmth. And then there were the raids. Small groups of Krylos drones would slip past the moon's weak defensive grid, attacking supply depots or ambushing patrols. Its attack left scars not just on the landscape but on the people themselves. Despite all this, Daniel tried to stay optimistic. He reminded himself that humanity had faced extinction before and always found a way to endure. "We'll get through this," he told Emma one evening as they sat in the dim light of their shared quarters. She didn't respond right away, staring instead at the cracked screen of her tablet, which displayed casualty reports from the latest skirmish. "Will we?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Or are we just delaying the inevitable?" Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. He didn't have an answer. Instead, he changed the subject. "Did you hear about the rumor going around?" "About?" "The Reckoners." Emma frowned. "You mean those soldiers everyone says are worse than the Krylos?" "I don't think I want to meet them. They're not real," Daniel said quickly, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. "Just stories. People tell to feel better." But deep down, he wasn't so sure. The Reckoners had become something of a legend among the refugees. Some claimed they were a secret unit created by the military, trained to fight without mercy or hesitation. Others said they were criminals recruited from prison colonies, given weapons and a chance to redeem themselves by killing aliens. Whatever. The truth. The tales painted them as both saviors and monster soldiers who got results no matter the cost. A few nights later, the rumors turned into reality. A transmission came through the comms system, faint and distorted but unmistakable. "This is Captain Ryan Carter of the Reckoners," a voice announced, cold and commanding. "If you can hear this, we're coming." "Hold on," the message sent. Shockwaves through the refugee camps. People gathered in the streets, discussing it in hushed tones. Was it really true? Were the Reckoners coming to help? Or was it some kind of trick? Daniel listened to the recording multiple times, replaying it over and over until he memorized every word. There was something about the tone of Carter's voice, steady, confident, almost cruel, that made him believe it was real. Emma, however, was less convinced. "What if they're worse than the Krylos?" she asked when Daniel brought it up. "Again, what if they destroy us too? We don't have a choice," Daniel replied firmly. "If they can stop the Krylos, then we need them, even if they scare us." As the days passed, strange ships began appearing on the horizon. Sleek black vessels that moved silently through space without lights or signals. At first, people thought they were Krylos reinforcements, and panic spread like wildfire. But then the ships landed, and out stepped figures clad in matte black armor etched with battle scars. Their leader, a tall man with piercing blue eyes, introduced himself simply as Captain Ryan Carter. "We're not here to save you," he said bluntly, addressing the crowd that had gathered. "We're here to win. Anyone who stands in our way will be removed." His words sent a chill through the air, but no one dared to argue. The Reckoners weren't asking for permission, they were taking charge. And for the first time in months, Daniel felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they stood a chance after all. Landscape, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. These weren't ordinary vessels, they looked like weapons themselves, sharp-edged and menacing, designed to strike fear before they even fired a shot. The air around them seemed heavier, charged with an energy that made people uneasy. Refugees whispered among themselves, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified. Captain Ryan Carter was the first to step off his ship. He moved with purpose, his boots crunching against the dusty ground as he surveyed the scene. His armor was scarred from countless battles, each scratch telling a story of survival. Behind him came his team soldiers, who carried themselves with the same quiet confidence. They didn't speak much, but their presence alone spoke volumes. Lieutenant Sarah Blake, a sniper known for her deadly accuracy, scanned the area with sharp eyes, while Corporal Jake Monroe adjusted the straps on his heavy equipment pack, ready for whatever came next. Daniel watched them closely. He had heard the stories about the Reckoners, tales of their brutal efficiency and willingness to do whatever it took to win. Some called them heroes. Others labeled them monsters. But seeing them in person, Daniel realized the truth lay somewhere. In between, these were not ordinary soldiers. They were something else entirely, humanity's last desperate gamble. Against extinction, Carter addressed the crowd without ceremony. "We're here because Earth sent us," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But don't mistake this for charity. We fight our way, and we follow no rules but our own. You can't handle that? Leave now." No one moved. The refugees exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared to walk away. They had nowhere else to go. The Krylos had taken everything else, their homes, their families, their futures. All that remained was Eos Prime, and if the Reckoners were their only hope, then so be it. Emma stood near Daniel, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had seen enough violence already, tending to the wounded after every Krylos raid. Thought of working alongside soldiers like these made her stomach churn. "They look like they're here to kill, not save," she muttered under her breath. "They're here to win," Daniel replied quietly. "Isn't that what we need?" Emma didn't answer. She wanted to argue, to say that there had to be another way, but deep down, she knew he was right. Humanity couldn't afford kindness anymore. Not when the Krylos showed none. Over the next few days, the Reckoners wasted no time getting to work. They began by assessing the defenses or lack thereof that protected Eos Prime. What they found wasn't encouraging. The colony's perimeter was guarded by outdated turrets and hastily erected barricades that wouldn't hold up against even a small Krylos attack. Supplies were running dangerously low, and morale was at an all-time low. It was clear that Eos Prime wouldn't survive another assault unless drastic measures were taken. Ryan gathered the leaders of the resistance groups, including Daniel, into a makeshift command center. Maps of the moon were spread out on a rickety table, marked with red circles indicating weak points in the defenses. "This is unacceptable," Ryan said bluntly, pointing to one section of the map. "If the Krylos hit here, you'll be overrun in minutes." Daniel nodded grimly. "We know, but we've done what we can with what we have." "You haven't done nearly enough," Ryan shot back. "Starting today, that changes." He turned to Sarah, "Blake, I want eyes on every approach vector. Set up observation posts. If the Krylos so much as sneeze in this direction, I want to know about it." Sarah gave a curt nod and left the room without a word. Next, Ryan turned to Jake. "Monroe, start fortifying the weak points. Use whatever materials you can scavenge. We don't have time to wait for reinforcements." "What about us?" Daniel asked, gesturing to himself, and the other local leaders. "How can we help?" Ryan studied him for a moment, as if weighing his worth. Finally, he spoke. "You and your people will assist Monroe, follow his orders without question, and if any of you get in the way." He let the sentence trail off, but the implication was clear. As the meeting ended, Daniel approached Ryan cautiously. "Look, I know you're used to doing things your way, but these people, they're scared. They've been through hell already. You can't just treat them like tools." Ryan fixed him with a hard stare. "I'm not here to coddle anyone. If they want to live, they'll do what needs to be done. End of discussion." Daniel clenched his jaw, but didn't press further. He knew arguing with Ryan would get him nowhere. Instead, he focused on helping where he could. Over the following days, he worked alongside Jake Monroe, reinforcing barriers and setting traps along potential invasion routes. It wasn't easy work, and tensions ran high. Many of the refugees resented taking orders from outsiders, especially ones as harsh as the Reckoners. But slowly progress began to show. The defenses became stronger, more organized. Meanwhile, Emma found herself drawn into the Reckoners' orbit too. Though she disliked their methods, she couldn't deny their effectiveness. When Jake suffered a minor injury during construction, she patched him up quickly and efficiently, earning a rare nod of approval from Ryan. "You're useful," he told her later. "Stay close." Emma bristled at his dismissive tone but held her tongue. She reminded herself that these soldiers weren't here to make friends, they were here to fight. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that working with them meant crossing a line she wasn't sure she wanted to cross. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the moon's surface, Daniel and Emma sat together outside the medical bay. The air was cool, and the distant hum of activity provided a strange sense of comfort. For a brief moment, it almost felt normal. "Do you think they'll actually save us?" Emma asked, breaking the silence. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but I think they'll try." "That's more than we've had in a long time," Emma sighed, staring up at the stars. "I just wish it didn't feel like we're trading one kind of monster for another." Daniel didn't respond. He understood her concerns, but he also knew they didn't have the luxury of choosing sides. The Krylos were merciless, and the Reckoners might be ruthless, but at least the Reckoners were on their side. For now, that was enough. Unbeknownst to them, the Reckoners were already planning their next move. Using stolen Krylos technology, they had identified a critical weakness in the aliens' operations and orbital station that served as a command hub for their forces. They could destroy it, they could cripple the Krylos' ability to coordinate attacks. It was a risky plan, one that would require precision and sacrifice. But Ryan didn't hesitate. To him, there was no other option. "We strike tomorrow," he announced to his team later that night. "And we don't stop until it's done." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Tomorrow would change everything for better or worse. Sharp and deliberate. Every detail mattered, every weapon checked, every piece of equipment tested, every plan reviewed. They didn't leave anything to chance. For them, failure wasn't an option. It couldn't be. If they failed, EO's prime would fall, and with it, humanity's last hope. Daniel and Emma were included in the mission too, though neither of them had expected it. When Ryan called them into the command center late the previous evening, they thought he wanted updates on the colony's defenses. Instead, he handed them each a small earpiece. "You're coming with us," he said simply, as if it were already decided. Emma blinked in surprise. "What? Why?" "Because we might need you," Ryan replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If things go wrong, and they probably will, we'll need someone who can patch wounds or think on their feet. That's you too." Glanced at Emma, who looked as uneasy as he felt. "We're not soldiers," he said carefully. "We've never done anything like this before." "You don't have to be soldiers," Ryan shot back. "You just have to do what we tell you, when we tell you." "Got it?" They nodded reluctantly, knowing there was no point in arguing. Over the next few hours, Sarah and Jake briefed them on the basics. How to use a plasma rifle, how to move quietly, how to stay alive in a firefight. It wasn't much, but it was all they had time for. By the time the sun began to rise, casting pale light over the rocky surface of Eo's Prime, they were as ready as they'd ever be. The team gathered near the dropships, checking their gear one last time. Ryan stood at the front, his expression unreadable behind his helmet. "Listen up," he said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "This station is heavily guarded. We go in fast, hit hard, and get out before they know what hit them. No hesitation, no second guessing. Anyone gets in our way, take them down. Understood?" Everyone nodded, even Daniel and Emma, though their hearts pounded with fear. This wasn't like the stories they'd heard about the Reckoners. It was real, and it was happening right now. The journey to the orbital station took less than an hour, but it felt like an eternity. The dropship shook violently as it passed through layers of debris left behind by previous battles. Outside the windows, the vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly, dotted with the wreckage of ships and satellites. Daniel stared out, trying to steady his breathing. He could feel Emma's hand gripping his arm tightly, her knuckles white with tension. When they reached the station, the Reckoners moved with precision that bordered on artistry. The ship docked silently, and within moments, the team was inside. The corridors of the orbital station were eerily quiet, lit only by flickering blue lights that cast long shadows on the walls. The air smelled metallic, tinged with something faintly sweet that made Daniel's stomach churn. Ryan signaled for silence as they crept forward. Sarah took point, her sniper rifle raised, scanning every corner for threats. Behind her, Jake carried a heavy pack filled with explosives, his eyes darting nervously from side to side. Daniel and Emma stayed close to the middle of the group, clutching their weapons awkwardly, unsure if they'd actually be able to use them. It didn't take long for trouble to find them. Round a bend in the corridor, they encountered a squad of Krylos drones patrolling the area. The creatures were insect-like, with segmented bodies and glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. They moved quickly, their claws clicking against the metal floor. Ryan held up a fist, signaling the team to stop. Without a word, Sarah stepped forward, raising her rifle. She fired 3 shots in rapid succession, each one hitting its mark with deadly accuracy. The drones collapsed, twitching briefly before going still. "Move," Ryan whispered, gesturing for the team to keep going. They pressed on, moving deeper into the station. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, louder than the soft hum of the station's systems. He kept glancing at Emma, who looked pale but determined. Neither of them spoke. They didn't dare. Their objective was a central control room where the Krylos coordinated their attacks. According to stolen intel, disabling it would cripple their ability to launch assaults on human colonies, but getting there wouldn't be easy. The station was a maze of twisting corridors and locked doors, each one requiring careful navigation. At one point, Jake used a small device to hack into a security panel, bypassing an electrified barrier that blocked their path. Sparks flew as the door slid open, revealing another stretch of shadowy hallway. As they neared the control room, the resistance grew fiercer. More drones appeared, accompanied by larger Krylos warriors armed with energy weapons. The team fought back fiercely, relying on speed and coordination to outmaneuver their enemies. Sarah picked off targets from a distance, while Jake tossed grenades into clusters of aliens, sending them flying in bursts of light and smoke. Daniel and Emma did their best to stay out of the way, firing sporadic shots whenever they saw an opening at one point. Emma froze when a drone lunged toward her, its claws raised. Before she could react, Jake shoved her aside and fired a burst of plasma directly at the creature, vaporizing it instantly. "Stay sharp," he barked, pulling her back to her feet. She nodded, trembling but grateful. Finally, they reached the control room. It was a large chamber filled with glowing consoles and holographic displays, showing maps of nearby star systems and troop deployments. In the center of the room stood a massive terminal, the heart of the station's operations. Ryan wasted no time. "Jake, plant the charges," he ordered. "Sarah, cover the entrances. Everyone else, stay alert." Jake knelt beside the terminal, attaching small explosive devices to its base. His hands moved quickly, his focus absolute. Emma hovered nearby, watching nervously as the seconds ticked away. Daniel kept his rifle trained on the doorway, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool air. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in an ominous glow. "They know we're here," Sarah shouted, taking position near the entrance. Moments later, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the corridor. "Charges are set," Jake yelled, scrambling to his feet. "Let's go." Ryan hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "Fall back. Now." The team bolted for the exit, dodging blasts of energy as Krylo's warriors poured into the chamber. Sarah fired blindly into the crowd, buying them precious seconds. Daniel grabbed Emma's hand and pulled her along, his legs burning with effort. Behind them, explosions rocked the station as Jake's charges detonated, sending shockwaves rippling. Through the structure, they barely made it back to the dropship, diving inside just as the station began to collapse. The ship lifted off just in time, narrowly avoiding a cascade of debris as the orbital platform crumbled into pieces. Through the viewport, Daniel watched the destruction unfold, his chest heaving with exertion. Beside him, Emma let out a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered hoarsely. "We actually did it." Ryan didn't celebrate. He sat in the pilot's seat, his expression grim. "Not yet," he said quietly. "The war's not over. Not by a long shot." As the ship sped away, heading back toward Eos Prime, Daniel leaned back against the wall, exhausted but alive. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they stood a chance. But deep down, he knew the cost of victory would always weigh heavily on those who fought for it. Makeshift banners and shouting words of gratitude as the Reckoner's dropship descended onto the landing pad. News of the orbital station's destruction had spread quickly, carried by the same communication systems the Krylos once used to coordinate their attacks. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope in the era fragile, its flickering light that pushed back against the darkness. But the celebration didn't last long. As the team disembarked from the ship, their faces were grim. Ryan Carter led the way, his armor scorched and dented from the battle. Sarah Blake followed close behind, her sniper rifle slung over her shoulder, while Jake Monroe limped slightly, favoring his left leg after taking a glancing blow during the escape. Daniel and Emma brought up the rear, both looking pale and shaken, but alive. Ryan ignored the crowd, heading straight for the command center. He motioned for Daniel and Emma to join him, along with Sarah and Jake. Once inside, he locked the door and turned to face them. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice low but urgent. "Taking out that station was just the beginning. The Krylos aren't gone, they're regrouping. Intelligence shows they're massing near a massive mothership hidden deep within a nebula." Emma frowned, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. "A mothership? What does that mean?" "It means we hit them where it hurts." "Most," Ryan replied bluntly. "That mothership is the heart of their operation. Without it, their entire fleet falls apart. If we can destroy it, we might stand a chance of ending this war." "But how?" Daniel asked, leaning forward. "Do we even get close to something like that?" Ryan hesitated, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room. Finally, he spoke. "We infiltrated. Use stolen Krylos tech to disguise ourselves and slip past their defenses. Once inside, we plant a virus designed to disrupt their hive mind. A system that controls all their forces. Without it, they'll be disorganized, vulnerable." "It sounds impossible," Emma muttered under her breath. "It is impossible," Ryan admitted flatly. "But we don't have a choice. This is our only shot." The weight of his words settled heavily on everyone in the room. They had seen what the Reckoners were capable of, but this mission sounded suicidal. Even Jake, who rarely showed fear, shifted uncomfortably. "What about backup?" he asked. "Shouldn't we call for reinforcements?" "There's no one else," Ryan replied. "Earth's military is stretched too thin, and the other colonies are barely holding on. Just us." Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. He wasn't a soldier. He never had been. Back on Earth, he'd been an engineer, designing engines for cargo ships. Now he was being asked to risk everything on a mission that seemed doomed from the start. But as he looked around the room at the determined faces of the Reckoners, he realized something. If they could do it, maybe he could too. "I'll go," he said suddenly, surprising even himself. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? This isn't like taking out a patrol or guarding a gate. This is life or death." "I know," Daniel replied, his voice steadier than he expected, "but I've seen what you do. I understand why you do it. Let me help finish this." Emma stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you crazy? You can't just volunteer for something like this." "I have to," Daniel said firmly. "If I don't, someone else will. Someone who might not make it back." Emma opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. She knew he was right. There was no guarantee anyone would survive this mission. But sitting on the sidelines wasn't an option either. After a moment, she sighed and nodded. "Fine. But if you're going, so am I." "No," Ryan said immediately. "Absolutely not. We need you here, keeping people alive." "I'm coming," Emma insisted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm not letting my brother walk into certain death alone. Besides, you said yourself we might need someone who can patch wounds. That's me." Ryan studied her for a long moment, then gave a reluctant nod. "All right. But you follow orders without question, got it?" "Got it," Emma said, though her voice trembled slightly. With the team assembled, preparations began almost immediately. Using scavenged parts and stolen Krylos technology, they built disguises that would allow them to blend in with the aliens' forces. The process was painstaking, requiring hours of careful work to ensure the camouflage held up under scrutiny. Jake handled most of the technical details, his fingers moving deftly over wires and circuits. "This had better work," he muttered, attaching a final component to Daniel's suit. "Or we're dead before we even step foot on that ship." As the hours passed, tension mounted. Everyone knew the risks involved, but no one voiced their fears. Instead, they focused on the task at hand, channeling their anxiety into action. Sarah spent hours cleaning and calibrating her sniper rifle, ensuring it would perform flawlessly when needed. Ryan reviewed the mission plan repeatedly, making adjustments based on new intel. Even Emma found ways to contribute, organizing medical supplies and preparing emergency kits for the team. Finally, the day of the mission arrived. The team gathered in the hangar, standing beside a sleek black stealth ship, specially modified to avoid detection by Krylos sensors. Its surface shimmered faintly, blending seamlessly with the surrounding darkness. Inside, the cockpit was cramped, but functional. Filled with blinking lights and holographic displays, Ryan addressed the group one last time before boarding. "Once we're inside, stick together. No heroics. If things go south, we abort and regroup." "Understood?" Everyone nodded, their expressions grim but resolute. As they climbed aboard the ship, Daniel took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He glanced at Emma, who gave him a small, reassuring smile. "We've got this," she whispered. The journey to the nebula was tense and silent. Outside the viewport, clouds of glowing gas swirled lazily, casting eerie colors across. The interior of the ship, the mothership loomed ahead, its massive form dwarfing everything around it. Spikes jutted out from its surface like the legs of some monstrous insect, and pulsating lights hinted at the activity within as they approached. Ryan activated the cloaking device, rendering the ship invisible to enemy sensors. They docked silently, slipping through an unguarded entry point. The team moved quickly, sticking to the shadows as they made their way deeper into the ship. Their disguises worked perfectly, fooling the Krylos drones that patrolled the corridors. Still, every step felt like walking a tightrope, one wrong move away from disaster. Their destination was the central chamber housing the hive, mined a pulsating mass of organic material connected to countless neural pathways. It was grotesque, almost alive, and radiated a low hum that vibrated through the floor. Ryan signaled for Jake to begin setting up the virus. Small device programmed to infiltrate and corrupt the alien network, but as Jake worked, trouble arrived. A squad of Krylos warriors appeared, alerted by some unknown trigger. Sarah reacted instantly, firing precise shots that dropped two of them before they could raise the alarm. The rest charged forward, forcing the team to scatter. "Keep working," Ryan shouted at Jake, engaging the remaining enemies with brutal efficiency. His plasma blades sliced through their ranks, leaving trails of smoke and ash in its wake. Daniel and Emma crouched behind a console, firing wildly to cover Jake as he finished his task. Finally, the device clicked into place. "It's done," Jake yelled, scrambling to his feet. "Let's go," they ran, pursued by waves of Krylo's reinforcements. Explosions rocked the corridor as Sarah detonated charges to slow their pursuers. Emma stumbled, and Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her along. Ahead, Ryan led the way, his movements sharp and relentless. Just as they reached the exit, Jake collapsed, clutching his side. A blast from an energy weapon had torn through his armor, leaving a smoking wound. "Go!" he shouted, pushing Sarah away. "I'll hold them off." "No!" Sarah screamed, turning back toward him. "Do your job," Jake roared, raising his weapon. "Finish it!" Tears streaming down her face, Sarah obeyed, sprinting after the others. Behind them, the sound of gunfire faded, replaced by silence. They barely made it to the ship, diving inside as the mothership began to destabilize. Through the viewport, they watched as the massive structure imploded, consumed by its own destruction. No one spoke as they sped away, the nebula growing smaller in the distance. In the quiet aftermath, Daniel held Emma close, both of them overwhelmed by grief and relief. They had won, but the cost weighed heavily on their hearts. The Reckoners didn't celebrate victories, they simply prepared for the next fight. And as the ship drifted through the void, heading back toward Eos Prime, Ryan stared out at the stars, his expression unreadable. The war wasn't over yet. In their own thoughts. The mothership's destruction had been a success, but it didn't feel like a victory, not after losing Jake. His final act of sacrifice weighed heavily on everyone, especially Sarah, who hadn't said a word since they left the nebula. She sat in the corner of the cockpit, her sniper rifle resting across her lap. Staring blankly at the floor, Emma leaned against Daniel, her head resting on his shoulder. Her hands were still trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. "Do you think he knew?" she whispered softly, almost afraid to break the silence. "Do you think he knew how much we needed him?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "Think he did," he said finally. "He knew what he was doing. Gave us a chance to finish the mission. It wasn't much comfort, but it was all he could offer." Jake's death had reminded them all of the cost of war, of every life sacrificed in the name of survival. Even Ryan, who rarely showed emotion, seemed quieter than usual. His usual sharp commands and cold demeanor had softened, replaced by a somber focus as he piloted the ship toward Eos Prime. When they landed, the colony greeted them with cheers again. Refugees lined the streets, waving flags and shouting words of gratitude. But this time, the celebration felt hollow. The team disembarked slowly, their steps heavy with exhaustion and grief. Ryan ignored the crowd entirely, heading straight for the command center. Daniel and Emma followed, while Sarah lingered behind, watching the celebrations with an unreadable expression inside the command center. Ryan spread out maps and schematics on the table. "The mothership is gone," he said, his voice low but firm. "That means the Krylos fleet is disorganized. Without their hive mind to coordinate attacks, they'll struggle to function as a unified force. This gives us an advantage, but not for long." "How long do we have?" Daniel asked, leaning over the table. Ryan hesitated, studying the data on the holographic displays. "Days, maybe weeks. They'll adapt eventually." "When they do, they'll come for us with everything they've got." "So what do we do?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with desperation. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to attack." "No," Ryan agreed. "We hit them first. No, we take the fight to their remaining strongholds before they can regroup. Hit them hard enough, and we might be able to end this." His plan was simple but brutal. Launch coordinated strikes against key Krylos positions across nearby star systems. Each strike would weaken their forces further, buying humanity more time to rebuild and prepare for whatever came next. It was risky, and it would require every available fighter from seasoned soldiers to untrained civilians, but Ryan saw no other option. "We'll need everyone," he said, turning to Daniel and Emma. "Every hand, every weapon. No one sits this out." Daniel nodded, though his stomach churned at the thought of sending more people into battle. He glanced at Emma, who looked equally uneasy. "We'll help," he said finally. "Whatever you need." Over the next few days, the colony transformed into a war machine. Refugees became soldiers overnight, trained hastily in basic combat skills by the Reckoners. Weapons were distributed, scavenged from old ships or crafted from scraps of metal. Barricades were reinforced and supply lines were organized. The sense of purpose was palpable, but so was the fear. Everyone knew the stakes. If they failed, there would be nothing left. Sarah threw herself into the preparations, working tirelessly alongside Jake's replacement, a young recruit named Alex, who had joined the Reckoners after losing his family to the Krylos. She didn't speak much, but her actions spoke volumes. Every target she marked, every strategy she helped plan, was done with precision and purpose. It was her way of honoring Jake's memory. As the day of the first strike approached, tensions ran high. The team gathered in the hangar, checking their gear one last time. The stealth ships stood ready, their sleek black forms gleaming under the dim lights. Ryan addressed the group, his voice calm but commanding. "This won't be easy," he said, looking each person in the eye. "We've faced worse. Stick to the plan, watch each other's backs, and remember why we're doing this. For Earth, for humanity, for everyone who couldn't make it." This far, no one spoke as they boarded the ships. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made it hard to breathe. Daniel sat beside Emma, holding her hand tightly. Neither of them had slept the night before, their minds racing with doubts and fears. But as the engines roared to life and the ships lifted off, a strange sense of determination settled over them. They had come this far. They couldn't turn back now. The first target was a Krylos outpost on a barren moon, orbiting a dying star. It was heavily fortified, its defenses designed to repel invaders. But without the hive mind to coordinate their efforts, the aliens' response was sluggish and disjointed. The Reckoners struck quickly, using stolen tech to disable the outpost's shields before launching a ground assault. The battle was chaotic, filled with bursts of plasma fire and the deafening roar of explosions. Sarah led the charge, picking off enemy commanders with deadly accuracy. Their shots echoed through the battlefield, each one striking true. Behind her, Alex covered her movements, laying down suppressive fire to keep the Krylos pinned down. Daniel and Emma fought side by side, their movements clumsy but determined. They weren't soldiers, but they held their ground. Firing whenever they saw an opening, Ryan moved like a shadow, slipping through the chaos with lethal efficiency. His plasma blade cut through the Krylos' ranks, leaving trails of smoke and ash. In its wake, he didn't hesitate, didn't falter. Every step he took was calculated, every strike precise. To those who watched him, it seemed unstoppable, a man driven by something deeper than duty or revenge. As the outpost fell, the team regrouped near the landing zone. The ground was littered with debris, the air thick with smoke, and the acrid smell of burnt metal. Exhausted but alive, they climbed back aboard the ships, ready to move on to the next target. There was no time to rest, no time to mourn. The war wasn't over yet. Over the following days, the strikes continued. One by one, the Krylos' strongholds fell, their forces crumbling under the relentless pressure of the Reckoners' attacks. With each victory, hope grew stronger among the refugees on Eos Prime. Word of the victory spread quickly, carried by communication relays to other human colonies. For the first time in years, people began to believe that humanity might actually stand a chance, but the cost of victory was high. Casualties mounted both among the Reckoners and the civilian fighters who had joined their cause. Supplies dwindled, forcing difficult decisions about rationing and resource allocation. And then there was the toll it took on the survivors. Nightmares, the guilt, the weight of knowing that every life saved came at the expense of another lost. Through it all, Green remained focused, his resolve unwavering. He pushed himself harder than anyone else, refusing to rest until the job was done. But even he couldn't escape the burden of leadership. Late at night, when the others were asleep, he sat alone in the command center, staring at the maps and schematics. His eyes were bloodshot, his face gaunt from lack of sleep. Yet he kept going, driven by a sense of purpose that none of them fully understood. One evening, as the team prepared for another strike, Emma approached him. "You should." "Rest," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "You're pushing yourself too hard." Ryan didn't look up. "There's no time for rest," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not until this is finished." "But at what cost?" Emma pressed. "You're not invincible, Ryan. None of us are. If you keep going like this, you'll burn. Out, and then, where will we be?" For a moment, Ryan said nothing. Then slowly, he turned to face her. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something softer, almost vulnerable.
Nice.
Said quietly, "Then everything we've done, everyone we've lost, it'll all be for nothing. I can't let that happen." Emma wanted to argue, to tell him that sacrificing himself wouldn't bring back the dead or undo the pain. Instead, she nodded and stepped away, leaving him alone with his thoughts. As the days passed, the strikes grew. Bolder, targeting larger and more dangerous Krylos installations. The team faced increasingly fierce resistance, but they pressed on. Driven by the knowledge that they were tipping the scales in humanity's favor. Slowly but surely, the tide was turning, and yet, amidst the chaos and destruction, moments of humanity emerged. Civilians risked their lives to help wounded fighters, sharing food and supplies despite shortages. Children played in the streets, their laughter echoing through the refugee camps like a defiant cry against despair. Even Sarah, who had seemed so distant and cold, began to open up. Sharing stories about Jake and the life they had dreamed of building together, these small acts of kindness and resilience reminded everyone why they were fighting, not just for survival, but for the future. A future where humanity could rebuild, heal, and thrive once more. But the war wasn't over yet, not quite. Massing their remaining forces near a massive asteroid field, using it as cover for one last stand. It was a desperate move, born of desperation and disarray, but it still posed a significant threat. If humanity failed to stop them here, the Krylos would regroup and launch another wave of attacks, one that Eos Prime and the scattered colonies wouldn't survive. Ryan called the team together in the command center. The maps and schematics spread across the table showed the layout of the asteroid field, with red markers indicating enemy positions. "This is it," he said, his voice steady but heavy with meaning. "If we win this fight, we end the war. But if we lose..." Didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Daniel glanced around the room at the faces of his teammates. They were tired, exhausted, really, but there was a fire in their eyes, a determination that hadn't been there before. Emma stood beside him, her expression resolute despite the fear she must have felt. Sarah adjusted her sniper rifle, her movements precise and deliberate. Alex checked his ammunition, his hands steady even as beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. And Ryan looked like a man who had already accepted whatever fate awaited him. "We'll hit them hard and fast," Ryan continued. "Split into teams. Sarah, you take high ground and pick off their commanders. Daniel, Emma, stay close to me. We'll push straight through the center. Alex, cover our flanks. No mistakes. No hesitation. Understood." Everyone nodded. There was no room for doubt now. This was at the moment they had been fighting toward since the Reckoners arrived on Eos Prime. Failure wasn't an option. The journey to the asteroid field was tense. Ships moved silently through space, avoiding detection by slipping between chunks of rock and debris. Outside the viewports, the asteroids loomed large, jagged shapes drifting lazily against the backdrop of stars. It was beautiful in its own way, but none of them had time to appreciate it. Their focus was sharp, their minds locked onto the task. Ahead, as they approached the Krylos position, the team disembarked onto a rocky surface littered with alien wreckage. The air was thin, forcing everyone to rely on oxygen tanks strapped to their backs. Ryan signaled for silence, leading the way with his plasma blade drawn. Behind him, Daniel and Emma followed closely, their rifles raised. Sarah scaled a nearby ridge, finding a perch where she could see the battlefield clearly. Alex stayed low, scanning the area for threats. The first sign of trouble came when a group of Krylos drones emerged from behind a cluster of rocks. They moved quickly there, claws clicking against the ground as they advanced. Ryan reacted instantly, charging forward with a speed that caught the aliens off guard. His blade sliced through two of them before they could raise their weapons. Daniel fired clumsily but managed to hit a third drone, sending it crashing to the ground. Emma ducked behind cover, her hands shaking as she reloaded her weapon. "They're coming," Alex shouted, pointing toward a larger group of Krylos warriors approaching from the left. "Hold your ground," I barked, stepping back to join the others. "Sarah, suppress." From her vantage point, Sarah began firing rapid shots, each bullet finding its mark with deadly precision. One by one, the Krylos fell, their bodies collapsing into lifeless heaps. But more kept coming, pouring out of hidden tunnels carved into the asteroids. The team fought fiercely, their movements fueled by adrenaline and sheer willpower. Emma crouched beside Daniel, her face pale but determined. "We can't keep this up forever," she said, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "We don't have to." Daniel replied, his eyes scanning the battlefield. "Just a little longer." As the minutes dragged on, the tide began to turn. The Krylos' numbers dwindled, their attacks growing less coordinated without their commanders to guide them. The Reckoners pressed forward, pushing deeper into the heart of the asteroid field. Finally, they reached their objective, massive generator powering the Krylos' defenses. Without it, their stronghold would collapse. "Plant the charges," Ryan ordered, gesturing to Alex. "Do it now." Alex sprinted toward the generator, dodging blasts of energy as he worked. His hands moved quickly, attaching explosives too. "The machine's base, charges set," he yelled, diving behind cover just as a grenade exploded nearby. "Fall back," Ryan shouted, turning to lead the retreat. "Move." The team ran, weaving through the chaos as explosions rocked the asteroid field. Behind them, the generator detonated in a blinding flash of light, sending shockwaves rippling through the surrounding rocks. The Krylos forces crumbled, their last line of defense destroyed, as the dust settled. The survivors gathered near the landing zone. Their armor was battered, their faces streaked with dirt and blood. But they were alive. For the first time in years, the galaxy felt quiet, not peaceful, exactly, but free from the constant threat of annihilation. Ryan stood apart from the group, staring out at the wreckage. His expression was unreadable, but his shoulders sagged slightly, as if carrying the weight of everything they had endured. Daniel approached him cautiously. "It's over," he said softly. "You did it." Ryan shook his head. "We did it," he corrected. "Not just me, all of us." Emma joined them, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ryan hesitated before answering. "Now we rebuild. Earth needs us. Colonies need us. Humanity isn't done yet." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Sarah stepped forward, her sniper rifle slung over her shoulder. "I'm staying," she said firmly. "There's still work to do." One by one, the others agreed. Even Daniel and Emma decided to stay, realizing that their skills were needed now more than ever.
Ow.
The Reckoners may have started as a unit of ruthless soldiers, but they had become something more, a symbol of hope, resilience, and unity. As the ships lifted off, heading back toward Eos Prime, the team looked out at the stars. The scars of war would never fully heal, but they had proven that humanity could endure if it in its darkest hour. The Krylos were gone, defeated not just by weapons or tactics, but by the unyielding spirit of those who refused to give up. And though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear: humanity had survived. Against all odds, they had found a way to rise again.